Today we're going to draw out the brachial plexus, which is the network of intertwined nerves for the upper extremity. So I'm going to work on drawing that out and then we'll do some explanation. So here we have our quick drawing of our brachial plexus. The brachial plexus includes the spinal nerves from C5 to T1. C refers to the cervical nerves and T refers to the thoracic nerves. Now, there can be an abnormal brachial plexus, which can be typically one of two things: prefixed, which is from C4 to C8, or postfixed, which is from C6 to T2. But here we drew out the normal brachial plexus. So here is our C5, C6, C7, C8, and T1. Now we're going to break up the different sections and start labeling what some things are. So here we have our first break, and on this side of it, this is all of our roots or rami. And then we have our next section, which is our trunks. Then we have our divisions. And then we have our cords. And then lastly, in this whole section over here, we have our terminal branches. So that's the breakdown of the different sections that we have within our brachial plexus. An acronym that can be used for this is Randy Travis Drinks Cold Beer. That was the acronym that was given to us today in class. And as you might see with my messy dotted lines, those ones are going to the posterior portion of the upper extremities, and then the regular non-dotted lines are going to the anterior portion. So now we're going to name our trunks. We have the three of them, and we refer to them as the superior, middle, and inferior. So we have the superior, middle, and inferior. And some of our stuff might get messed up, but hopefully you get the gist of it. Next we have our divisions, which there were no specific names for the different divisions here that were given to us today. And then lastly we have our cords, which here, this is our dotted line, so that means that it's going to the posterior. But in regards to the placement of this nerve compared to the axillary artery, it is posterior. So this one is actually called the posterior cord. And then we have the medial cord because of its relation to the axillary artery. And then the lateral cord, which gives you some of the orientation of how this brachial plexus is used. And then lastly, we have our terminal branches. So I'm first going to just write out the initials of what we have, but then I will go and write in what they stand for. So we have MMUAR. So what these stand for is, this is the musculocutaneous nerve up here. So I'm going to write that in a different color just so it stands out. So musculocutaneous. And then we have the median nerve, and I'm going to write that down here so it doesn't get cut off. And then we have the ulnar. And then we have the axillary. And then we all have, last but not least, the radial. So this is our basic drawing of the brachial plexus. And now I'm going to go through and I'm going to erase and redraw what we already have, and I'm going to draw in the nerves, and then I will explain what they all mean and where they come from. The first nerve that we're going to talk about is called the dorsal scapular nerve. And that comes off of C5. So this is our dorsal scapular nerve. And this comes from both C4 and C5. I know our drawing just shows C5, but it actually comes from both. So that is C4 and C5. Next we have our long thoracic nerve. So this comes from here, crosses C6 and goes through C7. So this is our long thoracic nerve. And this comes from C5, C6, and C7. Sorry, I dropped my marker cap. Next we have two nerves that are right here. One's going up, one's going down. So the one going up is the suprascapular nerve. So we're going to label that as suprascapular nerve, and this comes from C5 and C6. Down here we have the N2S is how we're going to label it. So N2S nerve, and that's because it's called the nerve to subclavius nerve. So nerve to subclavius, and I'm going to draw a little arrow or a little line. This comes from both C5 and C6 again. So those are our nerves there. Now, in this section, I'm going to fix my line, we have the lateral pectoral nerve. So this is our lateral pectoral nerve. And this comes from C5, C6, and C7. And then now, from this section here, which it's broken up, but I'm going to just fill those lines in, just for the sake of our drawing. We have three coming downward off of this. So here we're going to go first. We have the upper subscapular nerve. So we have the upper subscapular nerve. We have the lower subscapular nerve. And then we have the thoracodorsal nerve. I'm just going to draw this line a little longer so I can write it. So thoracodorsal nerve. Sorry for my misspeaking. And so the upper subscapular nerve comes from C5 and C6. The thoracodorsal nerve comes through C6 through C8. And then our lower subscapular nerve comes from C5, C6, and C7. So C5 through C7. So those are our three nerves there. We also have three nerves coming down off of here. And again, I'm just going to draw that middle one longer so I can write. So first we have the medial pectoral nerve. And then we have the medial brachial cutaneous nerve. So medial brachial cutaneous nerve. And then we have the medial antebrachial cutaneous nerve. So the medial pectoral nerve comes from C8 and C1, or C8 and T1, sorry, I keep messing that up. And then the medial brachial cutaneous nerve comes from C8 and T1. And then the medial antebrachial cutaneous nerve also comes from C8 and T1. Something to note about all of these that we've mentioned so far, all of these are motor nerves except for two of them. These two are sensory nerves. Sensory. And all the other ones that we mentioned are motor. So now we are going to talk about these final five. So like I said before, we have the musculocutaneous nerve. So musculocutaneous. Then we have the median, and I'll write it down here so we don't lose it. And then we have the ulnar, axillary, and the radial. So the musculocutaneous nerve up here comes from C5, C6, and C7. So C5 through C7. The median nerve comes from C5 through T1. So this is all of them. The ulnar comes from C8 and T1. The axillary comes from C5 and C6. And then the radial comes again from all of them. So C5 through T1. So all of them. These are our final 5. And now I'm going to show you a hand demonstration. So there were 3 musketeers, 2 assassinated, 5 rats, 5 mice, and 2 unicorns. So I'm going to show you what that means. Here is my hand. This is C5, C6, C7, C8, and T1. So our musculocutaneous nerve comes from these 3. There are 3 musketeers. C5, C6, C7. That goes with that one. 2 were assassinated, axillary, so C5, C6. So 2 assassinated, 5 rats, which is all 5 radial for the radial, 5 mice for the median, and then 2 ulnar. I messed it up the first time, but 2 ulnar. So that comes from C8 and T1. So 3 musketeers assassinated, 5 rats, 5 mice, and then 2 unicorns. And that helps you remember what is what of that. So now we're going to talk about which nerves are affected with what muscles. So first we're going to talk about the dorsal scapular nerve. Dorsal scapular nerve. And this one goes with the rhomboid major, rhomboid minor, and the levator scapula. The long thoracic nerve, this one right here, that one goes with the serratus anterior. And that's found in the lateral thorax. And if there's a lesion with this one, it causes a winged scapula, which causes internal rotation. Next, we have the suprascapular nerve, which is this one right here, suprascapular nerve. And this causes a supraspinatus for abduction. It also causes the infraspinatus for external rotation. If there's a lesion in this one, it causes weakened abduction and weakened external rotation. For N2S, the nerve to subclavius. This one goes to the subclavius. It's a nice name for that one. Then we have the lateral pectoral nerve. That's for the pectoralis major and minor. Then we have the medial pectoral nerve, which is for the pectoralis major and minor. And then we have the medial brachial cutaneous nerve, which is for the skin of the upper arm. And then we have the medial antebrachial cutaneous nerve, which is for the medial forearm. Now up here we have the upper subscapular nerve, which this one's for the superior subscapularis. So the upper subscapular nerve is for the superior subscapularis. The lower subscapular nerve is for the teres major and the lower subscapular. And then the thoracodorsal nerve is for the latissimus dorsi. For these final 5, we will get more information on those later, but the axillary nerve, that one's for the deltoid and the teres minor. And then something to know about the radial nerve is that this one's the largest nerve. So those are just some things to note. These two, the axillary and radial, are going to the posterior portion and posterior muscles, which cause extension. So these ones cause, let's do a pink marker. These ones cause extension. So these are for posterior extension. And then these 3 are for anterior extremities, and they're for flexion. So these ones are anterior, and they are for flexion. And this concludes my summary of the brachial plexus.